So I'm starting here by weighing the flour into a mixing bowl. It's 850 grams, and then I'm adding the water, which is like warm, hot water, mixing it up until it's just combined, scraping it all into a ball, and wrapping it up to cover it, prevent it from drying. Then I'm weighing some water into a container, adding a little bit of sugar, and my yeast. And then all I'm gonna do is break it all up and mix it all in until it's completely combined, so then the yeast can be activated properly. And then we're just gonna let this sit. You don't have to cover this part until it is nice and frothy. Here's the recipe. I'll also leave it in the description for anyone who wants it. Now that yeast is nice and frothy, I'm going to start mixing it. So I start by just breaking it up a little bit and pouring in the yeast, and then kind of breaking up that dough mass a little bit, but the mixer will do the work. Be careful when you first start mixing it, as it can splash out the sides. So I kind of turn it on and off and on and off, and it's rather annoying, but the product is worth it, I promise. Then here I'm measuring out some salt. We're gonna add this when the yeast is mostly combined and finish mixing it. Add it relatively slowly so it's not ending up in clumps in your final dough. Then you're just gonna mix and mix and mix and mix until it is at the proper consistency, which looks like this. I know it doesn't look great, but trust me, just trust the process. I swear, this is delicious. I add a little bit of olive oil to the bowl. It's not really integral to do a certain amount. It's just kind of enough to coat the bowl nice and well. And then we're gonna scrape all of that dough off the paddle and into our bowl of olive oil. Give it a little turn, and we're just gonna pour all of that dough right in there, not worrying too much about any sort of mess. It looks messy. We're gonna wrap it and we're gonna let it double. Beautiful. Next thing we're gonna do is put some oil on a pan. I use the same pan over and over and over again. I don't wash it because it's going into a very hot oven, so any bacteria is gonna get killed. Next thing we're gonna do is fold it over itself like so, until it's all scraped into the middle, and then we're going to dump it into that pan that has some olive oil in it, kind of wipe the excess off and fold it over itself 4 times. Right to left, left to right, up to down, down to up. Beautiful. It looks like a little blob. We're gonna spray it and wrap it and let it rest. Next thing we're gonna do is stretch it out. Not using too much pressure, but enough to kind of stretch it and work it, and just keep pulling it, keep pulling it. It's gonna go back and shrink into the middle, and it's rather annoying. Obviously, the longer you let it sit before this step, the easier it will be, but sometimes when you're working in industry, you just don't have time. I will go over how to do this at home. You just really need that stand mixer. I've never tried it by hand, but I'm sure it would work if you give it enough elbow grease. So at this point, I'm just popping any large bubbles that I see, and yeah, it doesn't have to go right to the edge because it'll expand as it proofs again. Wrap it, proof it again, beautiful. And then we're gonna top it. So I'm just peeling back this film, and we top it with a little bit of olive oil. I think that's kind of necessary to any topping. We do salt, rosemary, and olives, but really you can top it with anything you like. There's tons and tons of different focaccia topping ideas on the internet, so look it up if you need inspiration. This recipe is pretty easy and it's pretty adaptable. You can proof it a little more, a little less, leave it in the fridge overnight, and bake it in the morning. Just if you're gonna do that, obviously let it sit, come to temperature before you bake it so you get a beautiful rise out of it. But yeah, it's a pretty foolproof recipe. I'm pretty sure it's the Bon Appetit recipe if you know that channel. Just with a few modifications. The pastry chef before me figured this recipe out, and I really like it, so I wanted to just share it with the internet, even though the internet kind of already has it, but here we are. For doing it at home, you're gonna follow all the same steps, except right at the end, I use a fancy oven that most people probably don't have in their home. So what I recommend doing is just high temperature, as high as your oven can go. So we do 220 degrees Celsius, which is about 430 degrees Fahrenheit. So for baking at home, anywhere between 400 and 450 degrees Fahrenheit or 200 and 220 degrees Celsius, I'm sure is more than fine. It takes about 15 minutes, maybe a bit longer in a home oven, flip halfway through. And then what I'm doing here is taking it off of the tray and putting it on a baking rack while it is still hot to prevent any condensation, which would result in the bottom becoming not crispy and just moist, and that's not what we want. Because if you look, it's crispy all around the crust and very soft and chewy in the middle, and it's freaking delicious.